Hello, history enthusiasts. Welcome back to our channel, where we dive deep into the stories and figures that shaped our world. Today we're exploring the complex and often contentious presidency of Lyndon B. Johnson. Lyndon B. Johnson, LBJ, the 36th President of the United States, faced significant opposition and criticism during his time in office for several reasons. These include his handling of the Vietnam War, his approach to civil rights, the implementation of his Great Society programs, his personality and leadership style, economic issues during his presidency, and the urban unrest that marked the 1960s. One of the primary reasons LBJ was disliked by many was his escalation of the Vietnam War. Initially, Johnson inherited the conflict from his predecessors, but his administration significantly increased American involvement. Johnson believed in the domino theory, which posited that the fall of South Vietnam to communism would lead to the spread of communism throughout Southeast Asia. This belief led to a significant escalation in U.S. military presence. Johnson's decision to increase troop levels and authorize more aggressive military strategies, including bombing campaigns like Operation Rolling Thunder, resulted in high casualties and extensive destruction. The war became increasingly unpopular as it dragged on, without a clear end in sight. The draft, which forced young men into military service, exacerbated public discontent. As the war progressed, anti-war protests grew in size and frequency, reflecting widespread dissatisfaction. These protests were often met with violent responses from authorities, further fueling public outrage. The Tet Offensive in 1968, a series of surprise attacks by the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese forces, shocked the American public and media. Although militarily it was a setback for the Communists, it significantly eroded public support for the war effort and Johnson's presidency. The images of violence and the growing list of American casualties broadcasted on television nightly brought the harsh realities of the war into American living rooms, leading to an erosion of trust in the government's handling of the conflict. LBJ played a crucial role in advancing civil rights in the United States. He signed into law the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, two landmark pieces of legislation that aimed to end racial segregation and discrimination. While these actions were historic and earned him praise from many quarters, they also ignited significant backlash. Many white Americans, particularly in the South, were vehemently opposed to desegregation and the civil rights movement. Johnson's push for civil rights legislation alienated these voters and led to increased racial tensions. The legislation also spurred a political realignment, with many Southern Democrats feeling betrayed by Johnson and eventually shifting their allegiance to the Republican Party. Despite the progress made, the civil rights movement continued to face significant challenges, including violent resistance. The efforts to enforce civil rights laws led to clashes in several Southern states, where resistance to desegregation was strongest. This period saw numerous violent incidents, including the murders of civil rights workers and violent crackdowns on peaceful protests. Johnson's Great Society agenda was another source of both admiration and criticism. The Great Society aimed to eliminate poverty and racial injustice through an array of programs and reforms. These included Medicare and Medicaid, which provided health insurance for the elderly and the poor, and various education and welfare programs. Critics argued that these programs led to excessive government spending and created a dependency on welfare. Fiscal conservatives were particularly vocal, arguing that the expansive social programs were financially unsustainable and that they overextended the role of the federal government. The implementation of these programs also faced bureaucratic challenges and accusations of inefficiency. Supporters of the Great Society programs believed that they were essential for addressing systemic inequalities and improving the quality of life for many Americans. However, the opposition saw them as overreach and were concerned about the long-term economic implications. LBJ was known for his abrasive and domineering personality, a style that became known as the Johnson treatment. He often used intimidation, persuasion, and sheer force of will to achieve his legislative goals. While this approach was effective in passing significant legislation, it also alienated many colleagues and adversaries. Johnson's forceful methods could be seen as bullying, leading to resentment among those who felt pressured or coerced. His leadership style was often described as overbearing, and his relationships with many in Congress and his administration were strained as a result. This personal animosity extended to the public sphere, where his demeanor did not always endear him to the American people. The combination of funding the Vietnam War and the Great Society program strained the U.S. economy. Johnson faced criticism for the economic consequences of his policies, including rising inflation and budget deficits. The guns and butter policy, trying to fund both a major war effort and expansive social programs, led to significant financial pressure. Economic discontent grew as inflation rates rose, eroding the purchasing power of the average American. The economic strain was felt particularly acutely in the later years of his presidency, contributing to a broader sense of dissatisfaction with his administration. The 1960s were marked by significant urban unrest and riots in many major cities, often stemming from racial tensions, economic inequality, and frustration with the pace of civil rights reforms. Cities like Los Angeles, Watts, 1965, Detroit, 1967, and Newark, 1967, experienced violent uprisings that highlighted deep-seated social issues. Johnson's administration struggled to address the root causes of this unrest effectively. While his Great Society programs aimed to alleviate poverty and address inequality, the immediate response to riots often involved heavy-handed policing and National Guard deployments, which sometimes exacerbated tensions. The urban unrest was a stark indicator of the challenges facing American society and highlighted the limits of Johnson's domestic policies in creating immediate, tangible improvements in the lives of many urban residents. The violence and destruction during these riots further fueled public frustration and discontent with Johnson's leadership. In summary, Lyndon B. Johnson faced substantial criticism and opposition due to his handling of the Vietnam War, his aggressive civil rights agenda, the expansive Great Society programs, his abrasive leadership style, economic challenges, and the urban unrest of the 1960s. Each of these factors contributed to a complex legacy, marked by significant achievements as well as profound controversies. His presidency remains a topic of extensive study and debate, reflecting the deeply polarized views on his leadership and policies. Thanks for watching.